right into it. Oh, just as a review, your savings, you put money in and you earn interest, or also known as a time deposit. Remember, with your savings accounts, you really don't earn much interest. It's really just there to sit for you not to touch and to save for larger purchases in life. Your checking, you put your money in, use it for payment services, or also known as demand deposit. Remember, this demand deposit and time deposit are just different terms. They can mean savings, or if demand deposit can just mean checking. Your checking you're using almost every day, swiping your debit card, and instead of just holding cash on you, we put it in a checking account. And we know that checking accounts are a lot safer than holding cash, and we talked about that in the past. You could link these two accounts to avoid overdrawing. We know that's as insufficient funds when you try to pay for something that you don't have enough money in your account. I have this with PNC where my overdraft protection is if I try to purchase something with my checking and I don't have enough, PNC automatically takes money out of my savings to make up for the money I don't have in my checking when I go and I swipe my debit card. And that's their form of overdraft protection. So if you have a savings in a checking account, they link it. So whereas if I'm trying to pay something I don't have much for, they just bring the money over from one account to the other so I can purchase the item and not overdraw. Just a benefit that some banks do have. When you're choosing a savings and checking accounts, and I just had to do this myself last year, around last June when I switched to PNC, you want to consider restrictions. How much do you need to have a minimum balance? Is it 100, 200, or is there none? Do I have to make so many payments? Do I have to swipe my debit card so many times? Do I have to use their ATM machine so many times a month? So you want to see on their restrictions. Secondly, really look at the fees. Look at their fees when you want to transfer money. Look at any fees in terms of writing checks. You only have a certain amount of checks you can write. Although certain many times you can transfer money. I believe TD Bank had a certain amount of times I can transfer my money over from my savings to my checking, or they would hit me with a fee. Look at interest rates. All right, and that's our rate of return. Remember, your rate of return is just a percentage of the money that you made in interest. Remember, savings account, you don't earn much, but you'd still want to compare and get the best rate out there for your savings account. You want to look at liquidity. Liquidity is how easy to withdraw, how easy you can turn an asset into cash. So how easy can you get the money that's in your account in your hands in cash? Is there a process? Is there a fee that goes with that? You need to check that out. And lastly, special services such as overdraft protection, as I just noted. Is there mobile deposit with their app? Do their ATMs have withdrawal and deposit? So their special services, see what they offer. And for me, PNC had a lot of special services that I appreciated, and that's kind of why I went to them. So talking about savings and checking accounts, here, although not many people do it, you still need to know how to. It's a great skill to know, and with some payments, they may only accept a check. And I know back at Rampo, to pay off my housing deposit, they only accepted checks. So to write a check, we're going to cover this in class, but basically if you go by the numbers, all right, number one, you just put the date. If you look in the top right hand corner, you see 106, that's the check number. If you look at the top left hand corner, we're talking about Kenneth Buckley, that would be the person's account. If you had a check, your name and your information will be there. If you look at number two, paid to the order of, that's the payee. That's who is receiving the money. And three, you write in the amount. If you look at four, outside of writing the amount, you also have to write the amount in words. And we put the change over 100. Since this check was for $25, we only put 00 over 100. If it was $25.10, you'd put 10 over 100. If you look at 5 in the lower right-hand corner, that's where you sign it. And if you look at 6 in the lower left-hand corner where it says memo, that's the reason why. So you paid $25 to Bob's service station because you needed an oil change. Always give yourself a reason. So when you go back 2 or 3 weeks later, you may not remember and you want to know, why did I spend a certain amount of money at that area? Now, if you look all the way at the bottom, you see all those different numbers. The first grouping on the lower left, that's your bank's routing number. Every bank has a routing number that identifies the bank, what is your bank and where. So they can look up in their systems and find your bank. When they find your bank, if you look at the second group of numbers, that's your account number. So they go and use your bank's routing number or your ABA number. They look up your bank. When they find your bank, they then search your account number and it leads them to their account. And the last group of number, you see it's 106 and it matches the type right hand corner. That is the check number. Alright, so kind of the basics. We're going to be writing a lot of checks in class on Monday and Tuesday. But just to give you an idea before we start class. Now immediately when you write a check or anytime you swipe your debit card or some activity occurs in your checking or savings account, you want to update, if you ever heard, updating your checkbook or updating a check register. Now you can see, imagine we sent that check out to Bob's service station. Once we do that, we want to go ahead and our check register and update. So on the top, on the left hand side, we have our check number. Next we have our date. You can see there's two lines for description of transaction. You want to write who the check was going to, or if you're receiving it, who it was coming from. And below you want to write the memo or the reason. In the left hand side, we have our payment or debit. That's money. That's our cash outflow, money leaving our account. We put in $25. If it would say it was a direct deposit from our job, in the right hand corner, that's a deposit or a credit, money inflowing into our account. You can see that our balance before this check was $418. You just bring the amount over all the way to the right and subtract it or add it depending on whether it was a debit or a credit. Remember, debit meaning outflow, credit meaning inflow. And you put your new balance of $343 or $393, I apologize. And there we have our new balance. So when the next transaction occurs, and you can see it's Cutler Enterprises, we know what our balance is. And you always want to know, as a person who has a checking account or a savings account, you always need to know how much you have in your account. That's your responsibility, and that's why I say any overdraft charges, it's usually, and it has happened to me, my fault or the account holder's fault. You should know how much you have in an account at all times so you really never go under. But as I said, with checks, we'll be doing a lot of check registers as well. Continuing, moving on, there are some issues with checks, and with voiding a check, you cannot have any mistakes. No spelling mistakes, no mistakes with the numbers. You can't cross out on a check. Some banks do not accept. So whenever you have a mistake, you just want to write void right across the check in big letters. All right, and usually if you have a shredder available, shred your check. But write void as big as you can all over the check so the bank knows if it was ever given to them not to cash the check. We also have our stop payment orders, and we discussed this with our handout. That's when a check is lost or stolen, and you can request the bank or your bank or the bank that it's going to not cash a check. But usually that comes with a fee. And we saw in the handout it was, I believe, $20 to $25 fee. So something to be aware of. Fortunately, I never had to issue a stop payment order, but it does occur. And just as you're looking at your checking and savings accounts, when we talk about fees, a fee to look at just in case it were ever to happen to you. Now, making deposits, all right, there's a lot of different ways now to make deposits. Back in the earlier days, or maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was basically you go to a bank, fill out a deposit slip, give them your cash or your check, and they deposit it for you. But now we have so many different types, thanks to the advancements in technology and electronics. You can now just scan a check at an ATM, or you could just scan a check at your own home with your cell phone and deposit into your account. And it's just amazing the different ways we can now make deposits. So, and I told you with taking pictures of the checks, always want to keep your check on handy, but just know all different ways you can make deposits. Some people still prefer to use deposit slips, and at certain times, if I have a lot of cash on me, I'll go to my bank and walk in and fill out this deposit slip. But now you can just drive up to an ATM and deposit your cash at an ATM now without actually having to go inside. So just many different ways to deposit now. Make sure when you do make a deposit, you have to include your endorsement, and that's the signature of the payee. That's you, the party whom the check has been written to. So whenever you have a check, you have to sign the back of it because that is your endorsement, and it's okaying that these transaction occurs when you hand it to the bank teller. But do not endorse the check until you're ready to cash it or deposit it. I would wait until you actually get to the bank. Because if you sign it at home and then you're driving to the bank and you lose it, once you sign the check, now there's a lot of identification being asked. But if that's check signed and it's your signature and it matches the front, someone can cash your check. So I would wait until you're absolutely ready at the bank to cash it or to deposit it, just to be safe than sorry. And lastly, when we talk about mobile depositing and the advancements in technology, when you take that picture of the check, usually you'll see a deposit pending sign, very similar to the screenshot I have on your right. You just want to remember that you don't have access until the check clears. So just because it's pending doesn't mean you have access to, and in this case, we have a $35 check. All right, and it tells you at the bottom, in this example, that funds are normally received within 2 business days. And at that time, the bank will clear the check and you'll have your money. So just to be aware, just because it's pending, you don't have your money yet. If there's ever, it's taking a very long time for it to pen, a week or so, call the bank, but make sure you hold on to their check just in case something happens. And if they ask for it, and if you don't have it, you're kind of